Mile marker 73 doesn't exist on Highway 101. I counted 43 markers on a stretch that only has 42. When I stopped to check my map, the fog started breathing. That's when I realized something was counting me back. Welcome to Verified Fears. 11 highways, 11 encounters. One question: what happens when the fog knows your name? If you've ever felt watched on an empty road, don't drive away from this video. Because by story 7, you'll understand why some routes never let you leave. Hit that subscribe button and strap in, because the Pacific Northwest just opened a door you can't close. I've driven Highway 101 between Tillamook and Lincoln City for 6 years. 6 years of the same route, the same exits, the same mile markers counting down like a heartbeat. 42 markers on that stretch. I know because I've counted them more times than I care to admit during those long, mind-numbing Tuesday night deliveries. So when I counted 43 last week, I thought I was losing it. Exhaustion, maybe. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. But the number on that green reflective sign was clear as anything I've ever seen. Mile marker 73. And it was sitting right there between 72 and 74, like it had always belonged. It was 2:47 a.m. when I first saw it. The fog had rolled in thick off Tillamook Bay, the kind that turns your headlights into useless white walls that barely cut 5 feet ahead. I'd slowed to 40, maybe 35, just trying to keep the center line in view. The drizzle wasn't helping either, turning the asphalt into black glass that reflected nothing but more fog. I hadn't seen another vehicle in over 40 minutes. It was just me, my delivery van, and that suffocating blanket of white pressing in from all sides. That's when my odometer caught my attention. I just passed mile marker 72, and according to my trip counter, I should have been coming up on 74. But the math wasn't adding up. I was a mile short. I know that sounds crazy, obsessing over a single mile on a delivery route. But when you drive the same road 5 nights a week, you notice. You notice when something's off. And then I saw it. Mile marker 73. Fresh green paint, regulation size, exactly where it shouldn't be. I slowed down. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself it was real, that I wasn't hallucinating from caffeine withdrawal or highway hypnosis. The sign passed by my driver's window, and I watched it disappear into the fog behind me. My hands were gripping the steering wheel tighter than they should have been. Just a sign, I told myself. Maybe they added it. Maybe I'd miscounted all these years. But you don't miscount for 6 years straight. I kept driving, tried to shake it off. But then I noticed the guardrail on my right. There's this section just past the real mile marker 73, or what should be 74, where a truck clipped the rail about 2 years back. Left this twisted section that never got fully repaired, just sort of bent back into shape. Everyone who drives this route knows it. And I was looking at it right now, which meant I was past 74, which meant I should have already covered that mile. But according to my trip counter, I hadn't. According to the last marker I saw, I was at 73. I checked my odometer again. The numbers were climbing like they should, but they didn't match the mile markers anymore. It was like the road had stretched, like someone had inserted an extra mile into a space that shouldn't fit one. The fog got thicker. I'm talking about visibility dropping to maybe 10 feet, where even your hood ornament starts to look like a suggestion rather than a certainty. The temperature gauge in my van showed it was dropping too. 58 degrees down to 51 in the span of maybe 3 minutes. My breath started fogging up the inside of the windshield. I cranked the defroster, but it barely helped. That's when I saw the damaged guardrail again. Same twisted metal. Same section, same side of the road. I felt my stomach drop. I'd been driving for at least 4 minutes since I first saw it. At 35 miles per hour, that's over 2 miles. There's no way I was seeing the same guardrail unless I was driving in a loop. I sped up. 45, 50. The fog swallowed everything, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to see mile marker 74. I needed to see 75, 76, anything that proved I was moving forward and not just circling the same impossible stretch of highway. The center line blurred beneath me. The fog pressed closer, and then I saw it again. Mile marker 73. The exact same sign, like I'd never passed it the first time. My radio crackled. I never have the radio on during deliveries. I prefer the silence. Helps me think. But it crackled anyway, spitting out white noise that made my skin crawl. And then, underneath the static, I heard a voice. My voice. It was faint, distorted, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. But it was definitely me. I was saying something about the mile marker. I was asking if anyone could hear me. I was saying I'd been driving for 20 minutes and couldn't find mile marker 74. But I hadn't said any of that. I hadn't spoken out loud since I left the depot. My radio wasn't even on. I reached for the dial to shut it off completely, and that's when I saw my own face reflected in the driver's side window. Except it wasn't quite right. The reflection was looking ahead, focused on the road, but I was turned toward the radio. The reflection wasn't matching my movements. It was delayed, like it was showing me what I'd been doing seconds ago, or what I was about to do. I jerked my eyes back to the road just in time to swerve around something in my lane. I don't know what it was. It was tall, dark, and standing perfectly still in the middle of the highway. My headlights hit it for maybe half a second before I was past, and in that sliver of time, I saw it had the shape of a person. But the proportions were wrong. The arms were too long, the head was too narrow. And it was facing away from me, like it didn't care that I'd almost hit it. The damaged guardrail appeared on my right for the 4th time. I started laughing. I don't know why. Maybe it was panic. Maybe it was the sheer absurdity of being trapped in a mile of highway that shouldn't exist. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The radio was still crackling, still playing my voice on a loop, asking for help that clearly wasn't coming. I tried to stop. I slammed on the brakes, and the van skidded on the wet asphalt, fishtailing before I managed to bring it to a stop. The fog swallowed the red glow of my taillights immediately. I sat there, engine idling, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The radio went silent. The only sound was the rhythmic thump of my windshield wipers dragging across glass. And then I heard it. Footsteps on the asphalt, coming from behind the van. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. I wanted to look in the rearview mirror, but I couldn't make myself do it. Every instinct I had was screaming not to look, not to acknowledge whatever was walking toward me out of the fog. The footsteps stopped right outside my driver's side door. I could hear breathing. Low, raspy, like something was struggling to pull air through a throat that didn't quite work right. I hit the gas. The tires screamed, found traction, and I was moving again. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down. I just drove, watching the mile markers flash by in a sequence that finally made sense. Mile marker 74. Mile marker 75. Mile marker 76. The fog started to thin. The temperature climbed back to normal. My radio stayed silent. When I finally pulled into the depot 3 hours later, 3 hours late, which should have been impossible given the distance I had left. I checked my GPS logs. According to the satellite data, I'd traveled 60 miles further than the route required. 60 miles that didn't exist on any map. 60 miles that somehow fit inside a stretch of highway I could drive with my eyes closed. I haven't taken that route since. I told dispatch I needed a different assignment, said I was dealing with fatigue, needed a change of scenery. They didn't ask questions. But last week, another driver mentioned something strange. Said he'd been on Highway 101 near Tillamook, and he swore he counted 43 mile markers on a stretch that should only have 42. Said there was one between 72 and 74 that he'd never noticed before. I didn't tell him what I knew. I didn't tell him that mile marker 73 wasn't just a sign, it was a door. And once you notice it, once you see it and acknowledge it's there, the road remembers you. I still hear my voice sometimes, late at night when I'm trying to sleep. It's crackling through static, asking if anyone can hear me, asking if anyone knows how to find mile marker 74. And I know, somewhere out there in the fog, I'm still driving that loop, still looking for a way out, still counting mile markers that will never add up. The dashcam footage exists. That's the part that keeps me up at night. It's not a story I can dismiss as a panic attack or sleep deprivation. The Oregon State Police have it in their evidence locker, labeled as an unexplained incident, because they can't figure out what else to call it. The official report lists exposure and acute stress-induced cardiac event as the cause of death for the ranger they found 3 days later. What it doesn't mention is what the camera recorded. What it doesn't mention is that I watched the forest breathe. I was working the night shift as a forest ranger on Highway 26, the stretch that winds through Mount Hood National Forest near Zigzag. It's quiet work mostly. You drive the service roads, check for fallen trees, watch for illegal campers, make sure the trails are clear. That night, or technically, early morning, I was on SR 173, one of those narrow access roads that branches off near rhododendron. It was 4:15 a.m., and I'd just finished checking a trailhead when my engine died, just cut out. No sputtering, no warning lights. 1 second it was running fine, the next it was dead silent. I tried the ignition, nothing. Not even a click. The headlights stayed on though, which was strange. Battery was fine, apparently. Everything electrical worked except the engine itself. I grabbed my radio to call it in, let dispatch know I'd need a tow, probably wouldn't make it back before shift change. Standard procedure. Annoying, but not unusual. Vehicles break down. It happens. That's when I noticed the silence. And I mean real silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums like water pressure. No wind in the trees. No birds starting their pre-dawn chorus. No insects. Nothing. Just this absolute suffocating quiet that made my own breathing sound like a hurricane. I've worked these forests for 8 years. There's always sound. Always. Even at 4 in the morning, there's something. But right then, it was like every living thing within a mile had simultaneously stopped existing. The fog had been light when my engine died, just wisps drifting between the Douglas firs. But it was thickening fast. I watched it roll in through my headlight beams, watched it build from nothing into this dense, choking wall that cut my visibility down to maybe 15 feet. The temperature dropped. I'm not talking about a gradual cool down. I'm talking about 20 degrees in less than 2 minutes. My breath was suddenly visible. Frost started forming on the inside of my windshield. I turned on my dash cam. Habit, really. Whenever something feels off, you document it. That's the training. So I flipped it on, And I'm glad I did, because otherwise, nobody would believe what happened next. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, just waiting, listening to that horrible silence, when I heard it. A creak, wood on wood, like a tree swaying in wind. Except there was no wind. I'd been watching the fog. It wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, perfectly still, like it was waiting. Another creak, then another. I looked out my driver's side window, and that's when I saw the trees closest to the road were moving. Not swaying. Moving. Their trunks were contracting and expanding, pulling in and pushing out like lungs, like the forest was breathing. I sat there, frozen, watching 100-foot Douglas fir compress inward, its bark rippling, its branches drawing closer to the trunk, and then expanding back out. Slow, rhythmic, breathing. Every tree I could see was doing it, all of them in perfect sync. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The fog pulsed with them, thickening when the trees contracted, thinning slightly when they expanded. It was like the fog wasn't separate from the forest. It was part of it. The forest was exhaling fog. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, even though I wasn't going anywhere. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. All I could do was watch the trees breathe and feel my own breath start to match their rhythm without meaning to. That's when I noticed my reflection in the side mirror. It was dark, barely visible in the ambient glow from my headlights, but I could see my silhouette. And behind me, in the fog, there was another silhouette. Taller, broader, standing maybe 20 feet behind my vehicle. I spun around in my seat, looked through the back window. Nothing. Just fog and the rhythmic breathing of the trees. But when I looked back at the mirror, the silhouette was still there. Closer now. Maybe 15 feet. I locked the doors. Stupid, I know. Like locks would matter against whatever was out there. But you do stupid things when your brain is trying to process something it doesn't have a framework for. The silhouette moved again. I watched it in the mirror. It took a step forward, but it didn't walk like a person. It moved like the fog itself was shifting. Like something massive was displacing the air, and the fog was just filling in the shape of it. Then I saw my own silhouette move in the mirror. It raised its hand. I hadn't raised my hand. I was still gripping the steering wheel. But in the mirror, my reflection lifted its arm, reached toward the larger silhouette behind it, and the larger shape reached back. Their hands met. And I felt it. I felt something cold and impossibly vast touch the top of my head, pressed down like a hand resting on a child's skull. The pressure was gentle but absolute. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The trees kept breathing around me, and that pressure kept pressing down. And I realized, with perfect crystalline clarity, that I was inside something. Something so large that what I thought was a forest was just the interior of it. My dashcam was recording all of this. Later, when they recovered the vehicle, they pulled the footage. You can see the fog. You can see the trees moving. But what you can really see, what made the reviewing officer go pale and refuse to comment on the record, is the shape. When they enhanced the footage, when they adjusted the contrast and brightness, you can see that the fog isn't random. It's an outline. The entire visible area, every tree, every inch of road, everything my headlights touched, is contained inside a massive humanoid silhouette. The trees are inside it. The road is inside it. I was inside it. The pressure released. I gasped, sucked in air like I'd been drowning. The hand, or whatever it was, lifted off my head. The silhouette in the mirror stepped back, dissolving into the fog. The trees stopped breathing. All at once. They just stopped. Froze mid-exhale. And then the sounds came back. Birds, insects, wind. It all rushed back in like someone had unmuted the world. My engine turned over on its own, just fired up without me touching the key. The headlights flickered once and then stabilized. I should have driven away right then. I should have put the vehicle in gear and gotten the hell out of there. But I couldn't. I was shaking too hard. My hands wouldn't work. So I just sat there while the fog began to thin, while the temperature climbed back to normal, while the forest pretended it had never been anything other than trees and dirt and moss. When I finally managed to drive out, when I got back to the ranger station and tried to explain what happened, they thought I was having a breakdown, overworked, too many solo night shifts. They put me on leave. Mandatory psych eval. I would have believed them, would have convinced myself it was a hallucination brought on by carbon monoxide or stress or something, except for the dashcam footage. They couldn't explain that. They still can't. 3 days after my incident, another ranger was found on the same service road, dead in his vehicle, engine running, no signs of struggle, no toxicology hits. The autopsy said his heart just stopped, but his dashcam was running too. And in his footage, you can see the same thing. The trees breathing, the fog pulsing. And in the enhanced stills, you can see the outline, the massive shape that contains everything. I don't work for the Forest Service anymore. I can't. Because now I know. When you drive through those mountains, when you wind through those trees in the fog, you're not moving through a forest. You're moving through something that's using the forest as lungs, something so large that highways and trees and entire mountain ranges are just the space between its ribs. And sometimes, when the fog is thick enough, when the silence is deep enough, it breathes. And if you're unlucky enough to be there when it does, it notices you. It reaches down. It touches you. And once it touches you, you become part of the breathing too. The 911 dispatcher had the kindest voice I've ever heard. Calm, professional. The kind of voice that makes you believe everything's going to be okay, even when your car is sideways in a ditch and the temperature is dropping fast enough that you can watch your breath get thicker with each exhale. She told me help was on the way. She told me to stay in the vehicle, keep the engine running for heat, and stay on the line with her. She stayed with me for 38 minutes. I know because I watched the call timer on my phone. 38 minutes of her voice keeping me calm while I waited for highway patrol to arrive on Interstate 90, just past mile marker 52 near Snoqualmie Pass. When they finally pulled up, when the trooper knocked on my window with that concerned look they all have, the first thing he asked was whether I'd called 911. I said yes, of course I did. I held up my phone, showed him the call timer still running. He looked at my screen, then looked at me, and said dispatch never received a call from my number. He said they got an anonymous report about a vehicle in the ditch, but there was no 911 call. No record of it. Nothing. But I have the call log. It's right there on my phone. 38 minutes and 14 seconds. And I remember everything she said. Every single word. It started when I hit the black ice. I wasn't speeding, maybe 55 in a 65 zone because the fog was rolling in and the roads were getting slick. This was around 11:37 p.m. on a Tuesday in February. I was heading home from Seattle, making the drive I've made 100 times. The pass was mostly clear. just some patches of fog creating those weird halos around the overhead lights. And then my back end just went. No warning. Just suddenly the car was spinning, and I was gripping the wheel trying to remember if you're supposed to turn into the skid or away from it. And then I was stopped, tilted at an angle in the drainage ditch, nose pointed at the tree line. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, just breathing, taking inventory. Was I hurt? No. Was the car drivable? Probably not at this angle. Could I get out and walk? In this cold? Bad idea. So I did what you're supposed to do. I called 911. It rang twice, and then she answered. 911, what's your emergency? I explained the situation, told her where I was, that I'd gone off the road, that I was okay, but stuck. She asked all the right questions. Was I injured? No. Was anyone else involved? No. Could I see the mile marker? Yes, 52. She told me she was dispatching highway patrol, that they'd be there within 20 minutes given the weather, and to stay in the vehicle with the engine running. Standard stuff, exactly what I expected. But then she asked me something strange. She asked if my childhood dog was a golden retriever named Max. I went quiet, because yes, I had a golden retriever named Max when I was 8 years old. But that's not information a 911 dispatcher should have. That's not information anyone should have unless they knew me personally. I asked her why she was asking that. She didn't answer directly. She just said, I need you to confirm some information for me. Golden Retriever Max, you got him for your 8th birthday. Is that correct? My hands were shaking. And it wasn't from the cold. I said yes. I asked her again why she needed to know that. She said it was protocol, that she needed to verify my identity. That didn't make sense. She already had my phone number, my location, my vehicle registration from the plates I'd given her. But her voice was still so calm, so steady, that I convinced myself maybe this was just some new procedure I didn't know about. Then she asked about my college roommate. Asked if her name started with a J. I said yes, it did. Her name was Jessica. The dispatcher said, That's good. How is Jessica doing these days? And I felt my stomach drop because Jessica died 4 years ago. Car accident on I-5. I told the dispatcher that. I said Jessica passed away. And there was this pause, this long, horrible pause. And then she said, Oh, I'm sorry. I must have old information in the system. Let me update that. I should have hung up. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to end the call. But I didn't, because I was alone on a dark highway in below freezing weather, and her voice was the only thing connecting me to help. So I stayed on the line, and she kept talking. She asked about my apartment, the one I lived in during college. She described the layout, the kitchen with the broken tile near the sink, the bedroom with the window that never quite closed all the way. She described things she couldn't possibly know unless she'd been there, unless she'd stood in those rooms. I asked her how she knew these things. My voice was shaking now. I could hear it, that tremor of panic creeping in. She said she was just reading from the system, from my records. But 911 doesn't have records of your childhood pets or your college apartments or your dead friends. I told her I wanted to speak to a supervisor. She said, of course, she'd transfer me. But could I just confirm one more thing first? She asked if I remembered the recurring dream I had as a child, the one about drowning in a frozen lake. I never told anyone about that dream. Not my parents. Not my friends. It was just this nightmare I had maybe a dozen times between the ages of 6 and 10. I'd be walking on ice, and it would crack, and I'd fall through into water so cold it felt like knives. And I'd look up and see faces pressed against the underside of the ice, looking down at me. I'd wake up gasping every time. But I never told anyone. So how did she know? "Help is on the way," she said, and her voice had changed. It was still calm, still professional, but there was something underneath it now, something that sounded almost pleased. "The rescue unit is approaching your location. You should see their lights soon." I looked out my windshield. Nothing but fog and darkness. No lights, no traffic, nothing. I told her I didn't see anything. She insisted they were close. She described the vehicle, a white highway patrol SUV with unit number 847. She said the officer's name. She said he was less than a quarter-mile away. But I couldn't see anything. The fog was too thick, and there were no lights, no sounds of an approaching vehicle. Then I heard it, in the background of the call. Behind her voice, another voice, screaming for help. And it sounded like me. It sounded exactly like my voice, but younger somehow, more terrified. I asked her what that sound was. She ignored the question. She just kept saying the rescue unit was approaching, that I'd see the lights any second now, that I needed to stay calm. I looked at my phone screen. The call timer showed 35 minutes. My battery was at 12%. And in the corner of the screen, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The call wasn't showing as connected to 911. It was showing as connected to a number I didn't recognize. A number with a 360 area code and 7 digits that weren't in any logical sequence. I memorized them without meaning to. 360 7734 911. That's not how phone numbers work. That's not even the right number of digits. "They're here," the dispatcher said. "Look up. They've arrived." I looked up through my windshield, and I saw lights. Red and blue strobing through the fog, coming from the wrong direction. They were coming from the tree line, not from the road. The lights were moving between the trees, bobbing and weaving like they were being carried by something walking on uneven ground. Getting closer. I could hear branches snapping. I could hear something breathing, heavy and labored, like whatever was carrying those lights was struggling under their weight. I started my engine. The car was at an angle, but I didn't care. I threw it in reverse, felt the tires spin and catch, and I clawed my way out of that ditch through pure momentum and panic. The lights in the trees were close now, maybe 50 feet away, and I could see they weren't attached to a vehicle. They were just lights, strobing red and blue in the darkness, held by nothing, moving toward me. I got the car onto the road, and I drove. I didn't look back. The dispatcher was still talking, asking why I was leaving, saying the rescue unit had arrived, and I needed to come back. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. And that's when I saw real lights behind me. Actual highway patrol, actual strobing lights on an actual SUV. They pulled me over a mile down the road. The trooper who approached my window had the call log, the anonymous report. He showed me the timestamp, 12:15 a.m. But that was impossible. I'd been on the phone since 11:37. I'd been talking to that dispatcher for 38 minutes. I showed him my phone, showed him the call duration. He looked at it, looked at me, asked if I'd been drinking. The call log on my phone shows 38 minutes and 14 seconds. Connected to 360 7734 911. I've tried calling it back. It rings, and rings, and rings. And sometimes, if I let it ring long enough, someone picks up, and I hear my own voice asking if help is coming. asking if anyone can see the lights, asking why it's so cold. I don't drive the pass anymore. I take the long way, even if it adds 2 hours. Because I know now that when you call for help in certain places, at certain times, something else answers. And whatever it sends isn't coming to rescue you. It's coming to add your voice to the others already on the line, waiting for someone new to call. You ever notice someone in your peripheral vision and they just stick there? Like a floater in your eye, except it's a person. And they shouldn't be keeping pace with your vehicle when you're doing 60 on a mountain highway? That's what happened to me on Highway 2, Stevens Pass, westbound between Skycomish and Index. I saw him for 11 minutes straight. 11 minutes. You know how long that is when something impossible is happening? When you pass someone walking on the shoulder, you see them for maybe 3-4 seconds tops. They appear in your headlights, you register their presence, and they're gone, swallowed by the darkness behind you. But this one never left, never got closer, never got farther away. It was 5:50 in the morning. That weird twilight period where the world is gray and colorless and your headlights are still on but barely doing anything useful. The fog was rolling through in patches, thick in the valleys, thin on the ridges, creating these pockets of visibility that came and went without warning. I was hauling a load of lumber down from the eastern side of the pass, making good time, no traffic to speak of. Just me and the road, and that persistent gray fog that made everything look like an old photograph. I first saw him coming out of a fog bank near the Deception Falls area. Just a figure on the shoulder, walking westbound, same direction I was heading. Dark jacket, hood up, hands in pockets. The kind of person you feel bad for because who the hell walks Highway 2 at dawn in February? But I was in the right lane, giving him plenty of space, and I figured I'd pass him in a second and that would be that. Except I didn't pass him. I kept driving, maintained my speed at 60. The shoulder walker stayed exactly where he was in relation to my truck, about 200 feet ahead and to the right, walking at what should have been an impossible pace to keep up with me. I checked my speedometer, 60 miles per hour, checked my mirrors to make sure I wasn't somehow stopped or rolling backwards. Nope. The road was moving behind me like it should. The mile markers were clicking by. Everything was normal except for that figure on the shoulder who refused to fall behind. I slowed down to 50. Figured maybe there was some optical illusion happening, some trick of the fog and the light that made it seem like he was maintaining distance. The figure slowed down, not gradually, instantly. Like someone had adjusted his playback speed to match mine. Same walking gait, same rhythm, just covering less ground per step. Still exactly 200 feet ahead. My hands tightened on the wheel. I sped back up to 60. He sped up. 70. He matched it. I was doing 70 miles per hour on a winding mountain highway in patchy fog, and this figure was walking, not running, walking. Fast enough to stay perfectly positioned ahead of me. His stride never changed. His pace never looked hurried. He just moved at whatever speed necessary to maintain that exact distance. I tried changing lanes. Moved to the left lane like I was passing a slower vehicle, even though there was no other vehicle. The figure shifted too. Not across the lanes. There was no shoulder on the left side, just a guardrail and a drop-off. He just repositioned somehow. Appeared in my line of sight in the same relative position, still on the right shoulder that I was no longer next to. That's when my stomach started to knot up. That's when I understood this wasn't about fog or tricks of light or fatigue. This was something else. I could see other details now because I'd been staring at him for 6-7 minutes. His jacket was dark green, military style. His hood completely covered his head, no face visible. His hands stayed buried in his pockets. He never looked back at me, never acknowledged the truck bearing down on him minute after minute, just kept walking. The fog would thicken, and I'd lose sight of him for maybe 5 seconds, and I'd feel this stupid surge of relief. But then the fog would thin, and there he'd be, exactly 200 feet ahead, like he'd never disappeared at all. I grabbed my CB radio. Didn't even know what I was going to say. Hey, anyone else seeing weird shit on Highway 2? But when I keyed the mic, all I got was static. Loud, aggressive static that made me drop the handset. I tried my cell phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual for this stretch. But the timing felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. The sun should have been coming up by now, brightening the sky, burning off the fog. But it stayed that same flat gray, like dawn had stalled out and given up. 9 minutes. I'd been watching him for 9 minutes. My neck was starting to hurt from the tension. My eyes were burning from not wanting to blink, from being afraid that if I looked away for even a second, he'd be somewhere else, somewhere worse. I started talking to myself. This isn't real. This is microsleep. You're hallucinating because you've been driving too long. But I wasn't tired. I was more alert than I'd ever been in my life. Every nerve was firing, every sense dialed up to maximum, my body screaming that I was in danger, even though the danger was just walking ahead of me, not threatening anything except my understanding of how the world works. I made a decision. I floored it. The engine roared, the truck surged forward. The speedometer climbed to 75, then 80. This was stupid on a foggy mountain highway, borderline suicidal, but I didn't care. I needed to either catch up to that figure or leave it behind. I needed this to resolve. The figure accelerated. Same walking gait, same casual stride, but covering ground like an Olympic sprinter, like someone had cranked up the playback speed to match my 80 miles per hour. Still 200 feet ahead, still perfectly positioned. I slammed on the brakes. The truck protested, the load shifted, the tires screamed, but I brought it down to 40, then 30, then 20. The figure slowed with me. Exactly matched. Never closer, never farther. And that's when I understood. Distance didn't matter. Speed didn't matter. This thing had locked onto me, had established its position relative to my vehicle, and it would maintain that position no matter what I did. I was towing it. Not with a chain or a rope, but with something else. Something that connected us in a way I couldn't see but could feel pulling taut between my truck and that figure. 11 minutes. I'd been watching him for 11 minutes when the fog lifted. Not gradually, all at once. Like a curtain being pulled back. But the gray evaporated, and suddenly I could see a quarter-mile ahead, could see the road winding down toward Index, could see the trees sharp and clear in the morning light. And I could see the shoulder was empty. No figure, no walker, nothing. Just asphalt and gravel and the white stripe dividing the road from the drop-off. I exhaled. Didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath. My hands were cramping from gripping the wheel. I flexed them, rolled my shoulders, tried to convince myself it was over. Tried to laugh it off as highway hypnosis or some weird fog phenomenon. I checked my mirrors. Empty road behind me. I looked ahead. Empty road. I was alone. Finally, blessedly alone. And then I looked to my right, at the passenger window. And he was there, pressed against the glass, face distorted by the pressure, features flattened and wrong. But definitely a face. The hood had fallen back. I could see eyes. Too many eyes. They covered his forehead, his cheeks, clustered around where his nose should have been. And they were all looking at me, all blinking in synchronization. The mouth opened, and it was full of fog. Not breath, fog. Pouring out like smoke, running down the outside of the glass. I screamed, jerked the wheel. The truck swerved, crossed into the oncoming lane, and I wrestled it back. When I looked again at the passenger window, he was gone. Just condensation on the glass, forming a vague outline where something had pressed against it. A handprint. Except it had too many fingers. 7, at least. Maybe more. They radiated out from the palm in directions that didn't match human anatomy. I didn't stop until I reached Sultan. Pulled into the first gas station I saw, stumbled out of the cab, and threw up in the garbage can by the pumps. The attendant asked if I was okay. I couldn't answer. I just pointed at my passenger window at the handprint slowly evaporating in the morning sun. He looked, said he couldn't see anything. The glass was clear. I looked again. He was right. No handprint, no condensation, nothing. But I know what I saw. I know what kept pace with me for 11 minutes, walking at impossible speeds, maintaining impossible distance, waiting for the moment I thought I was safe to show me its face. I know that the stretch of Highway 2 between Skycomish and Index has a shoulder walker. And if you see him, if he appears in your headlights and doesn't fall behind when you pass, don't speed up. Don't slow down. Don't try to outrun him or outlast him. Because the distance doesn't matter to him. The only thing that matters is that he's found you. And once he's locked on, once he's established his position 200 feet ahead of you, he'll stay there as long as he wants. Walking, waiting, getting ready to show you what's under the hood, getting ready to press his face against your window and breathe fog into your truck and make you understand that some things on the highway aren't hitchhiking. They're hunting. And they're patient. So very, very patient. There's a rest stop on Highway 101 near Aberdeen that doesn't exist. I know because I've looked for it 14 times since that night. Driven that same stretch between mile markers 88 and 91 in every possible condition. Clear skies, rain, fog, middle of the day, dead of night. It's never there. But it was there on March 17th at 9:47 p.m. when I pulled off because I couldn't keep my eyes open another mile. And according to my dash clock, when I pulled back onto the highway, it was 10:34 p.m. 47 minutes. I lost 47 minutes in a rest stop that the Washington State Department of Transportation swears was never built. I was driving back from visiting family in Port Angeles, making the coastal route because the inland highways were getting hammered by storms. Highway 101 was clear enough, just heavy fog rolling in off Gray's Harbor. The kind that makes your high beams useless and turns every reflective sign into a smeared glow. I'd been on the road for 3 hours, and I was fading fast. You know that feeling when your eyelids start to weigh about 50 pounds each and you catch yourself drifting between lanes. That's where I was. Dangerous, stupid, I needed to pull over. The sign appeared in my headlights like a gift. Rest area 2 miles. I didn't remember a rest area in this section, but I also didn't care. 2 miles of staying alert, and then I could close my eyes for 20 minutes, shake off the fatigue, finish the drive home. The fog was getting thicker, reducing my world to about 30 feet of visible road. But I saw the exit clearly enough. A standard off-ramp with the blue rest area sign and the little icon of a picnic table. I took it. The rest stop was small. Single building, maybe a dozen parking spaces, surrounded by tall cedars that looked black in the fog and the limited lighting. There were no other vehicles, which made sense given the hour and the weather. The building itself was concrete block, institutional and bland, with that yellowish exterior lighting that makes everything look vaguely sickly. I pulled into a space near the entrance, killed the engine, and just sat there for a minute, feeling the exhaustion settle over me like a heavy blanket. I should have noticed things then. I should have paid attention to the fact that the vending machines visible through the front windows were the old style, the kind with the pull handles instead of the electronic displays. I should have wondered why the exterior lights had that sodium vapor color when most rest stops upgraded years ago. I should have questioned why the whole place felt like it was stuck in 1987. But I was tired. Bone tired. All I wanted was a bathroom and maybe a terrible cup of coffee from whatever machine they had inside. The door opened smoothly, and I stepped into fluorescent lighting that hummed just a bit too loud. The interior was spotless. Unnaturally clean. The tile floor gleamed. The walls had no graffiti, no scuff marks, no wear at all. The bathroom doors looked freshly painted. Even the bulletin board near the entrance, which usually hosts wrinkled flyers and outdated tourism brochures, had perfectly aligned notices under glass that looked like they'd been placed yesterday. There was a smell, too. Cedar and something else. Something chemical and sweet that reminded me of funeral homes. I walked to the men's room, and that's when I saw the attendant. He was standing behind a maintenance desk I hadn't noticed, wearing a dark green uniform with a patch that said Washington State Parks in gold thread. The uniform style was wrong. Too boxy. Too formal. Like something from a vintage photograph. He was older, maybe 60, with this pleasant smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He nodded at me. Evening. Restrooms are open. Coffee's fresh if you need it. I thanked him and continued to the bathroom. It was as pristine as the rest of the facility. White tile, chrome fixtures that actually shone, no soap scum or water spots or any of the usual rest stop bathroom horrors. I used the facilities, washed my hands, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked exhausted. Dark circles under my eyes, skin pale and drawn. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to shock myself back to full alertness. When I came back out, the attendant was still at his desk, writing something in a ledger, an actual ledger, paper and pen, not a computer. I approached the vending machines, and that's when I really started to notice. The snacks were wrong. Candy bars in wrappers I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Soda brands that don't exist anymore. Everything was priced at 75 cents. I dug in my pocket for change, fed quarters into the coffee machine, and watched as it dispensed something brown and steaming into a paper cup. "Long drive?" the attendant asked. His voice was friendly but flat, like he was reading from a script. "Yeah," I said. Heading back to Olympia, needed a break. "Good idea." Dangerous to drive tired. He went back to his ledger. I noticed he was writing names. Columns of names in neat handwriting. I couldn't read them from where I stood, but there were a lot of them. I took my coffee to one of the plastic chairs bolted to the wall and sat down. The coffee tasted like hot water flavored with the memory of coffee. I drank it anyway. I checked my phone, no signal, which was typical for this area, and just sat there, feeling my muscles unclench, feeling the warmth of the building seep into me. I just closed my eyes for a minute. Just a minute. I opened my eyes to the attendant standing over me. I jerked awake, sloshed coffee on my jacket. "Sorry," he said, still with that pleasant, empty smile. "We're closing soon. Thought you'd want to know." "Closing. Rest areas don't close." I was still foggy from what must have been a micro-sleep. "This one does. Midnight curfew. State regulation. He walked back to his desk. I looked at the clock on the wall, one of those industrial ones with a red second hand. It showed 10:32 p.m. That couldn't be right. I'd pulled in at 9:47. I'd been inside for maybe 15 minutes. 20 tops. I checked my phone. Dead. Battery completely drained, even though it had been at 60% when I arrived. I stood up feeling disoriented, feeling like the room had shifted slightly while I wasn't paying attention. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter now. The humming was louder. The cedar smell was overpowering. "Thanks," I mumbled to the attendant and headed for the door. He didn't look up from his ledger. As I passed his desk, I glanced down at the names he was writing. My stomach dropped. I saw my own name, my full name, including the middle name I never use. It was written 3/4 of the way down the page in a column dated March 17th. Below my name were several more. Above it, dozens, maybe hundreds if he'd filled previous pages. I walked faster, pushed through the door into the fog and the night. My car was where I left it, but something felt wrong about it. It looked smaller, more distant, like I was seeing it through the wrong end of a telescope. I fumbled with my keys, got the door open, threw myself into the driver's seat. The dash clock showed 10:34 p.m., 47 minutes since I'd pulled in. But I'd only been inside for 20 minutes, maybe 25. I started the engine and got the hell out of there. The exit back to Highway 101 was exactly where it should be. The fog was exactly as thick as when I'd arrived. Everything was normal except for the feeling crawling up my spine that I'd just escaped something that had been gentle and patient and perfectly content to let me think I was safe. I drove straight home. Didn't stop. Didn't even slow down until I was pulling into my own driveway 2 hours later. I plugged in my phone, and when it powered back up, there were texts from my sister asking if I'd made it home okay. The timestamps showed she'd been messaging me for the last 3 hours, increasingly worried. The last one said she was about to call the police. I reassured her I was fine, told her my phone died, went inside and tried to forget about the rest stop. Tried to convince myself it was just fatigue and fog and an overactive imagination. And I almost succeeded until the mail arrived 4 days later. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. It showed my car in the rest stop parking lot, taken from outside the vehicle through the driver's side window. And I was in the driver's seat, slumped over, eyes closed, completely unconscious. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the reflection in the windshield. You can see the rest stop building. You can see the windows and the interior lighting. And you can see that the building is reversed. Like the photograph was taken from inside the car looking out. Like someone had been sitting in the passenger seat or standing in the back seat, photographing me while I was unconscious. I've tried to find the rest stop 14 times. I've filed reports with the state police, with the Department of Transportation, with anyone who would listen. They all say the same thing. There's no rest area between mile markers 88 and 91 on Highway 101. There never has been. But I have the photograph. And according to online forums I've found since, I'm not the only one. 14 other people have reported stopping at rest stop 247 in the last 6 years. All of them lost exactly 47 minutes. All of them received Polaroids in the mail, showing themselves unconscious in their vehicles. And all of them appear in the ledger. The attendant writes down everyone who stops. Everyone who closes their eyes in that pristine, cedar-scented building. Everyone who thinks they're just taking a short rest on a foggy night on Highway 101. He writes down their names, and then sometime later, when they least expect it, they get proof that those 47 minutes weren't just missing, they were stolen. And whoever's running Rest Stop 247 wants you to know they still have them, still have those minutes, still have you in a way. Captured forever in Polaroid emulsion, asleep in your car while something patient and methodical stands in the back seat and documents your vulnerability. I don't take Highway 101 anymore. And I never, ever stop at rest areas alone at night. Sometimes you're alone in your car, rolling through fog in the dark toward home. And sometimes you realize you're not. But the moment doesn't come with headlights or horns, just with a feeling. That the empty seat beside you isn't empty. That the silence in the cabin belongs to someone else, too. That something slipped in when reality was soft, tired, and slippery. If you've ever driven Highway 26, hitting the deep patches of fog west of Mount Hood, you know what I mean. I wouldn't have told anyone if it hadn't happened to me. I was on the Sylvan Hills section, just past sunset, the golden hour bleeding away and taking with it any sense of reassurance. The highway gets quiet at that time. The world folds down to just you, the dashboard, breathing, and the steady hum of the tires. Streetlights along this stretch burn halos through the mist, warping time, making distances elastic and untrustworthy. It was like driving through an aquarium made of cold, wet air. Everything that moved out there might just as easily have moved in here. I was coming up on the Vista Ridge Tunnel when I saw the other car. It was just a set of headlights in the mirror at first, which isn't unusual. Except it wasn't there one moment, and the next, it was. Perfectly aligned behind me, holding the same speed, melting into the fog with a precision that felt deliberate. It was the make and model that caught me. A dull blue sedan, aging but cared for. I drive a dull blue sedan. It matched my car exactly. I checked my rear view, then my side mirrors. There were two of us now. It felt oddly comforting, like a convoy in the lonely night, until it didn't. I changed lanes to pass a slow truck. The blue car did too, mimicking my move flawlessly. I slowed down, approaching a construction zone. They slowed. When I sped up after merging again, I watched the other car keep exact pace. My nerves started to fizz. Space on a night like this should be mine, private, secret. But I'd lost it. Whoever was behind me, or beside me, knew how I drove, almost knew who I was. The tunnel threw everything into amber and shadow. For a moment, both cars were walled in together. The fog outside gave way to subterranean silence inside, and I felt, viscerally, the peculiar exposure of being observed. I glanced out of habit at the blue car as we entered the tunnel. Their windows were so fogged up I couldn't see the driver. But the outline in the seat looked familiar. Too familiar. I've never liked mirrors much. And that's what it felt like. The world reaching back to observe my motions. As we exited the tunnel, I noticed something wrong with my dashboard. The trip odometer was climbing in double digits, ticking up faster than miles were passing. By the time we hit the zoo exit turnoff, the numbers had blurred past my expectations. My breathing grew sharper, my focus narrowing. A sudden flicker, my phone lit up with a Bluetooth notification. A device called Merge72 wanted to connect. That's my car's make and year, but I'd never named my device Merge. I swiped it away, but it came back, pinging every couple of miles like an insistent knock. The other car drifted closer, close enough for its headlights to fill my cabin with silver light. I decided to test it. I changed lanes, more sharply this time, risking a swerve. They did too. A breath's delay, but precise. I forced myself to look directly through the driver's window this time. Their face poked through the dirty glass and condensation just for one heartbeat, long enough to make me freeze at the wheel. It was me. My jacket, my tired face, even the small birthmark below my left eye. But the expression was hollow, like someone seeing themselves for the first time and not liking what they saw. The fog thickened, wrapping the highway up in a shroud. I tried rationalizing. Sometimes cars ghost each other, drivers with matching routes, matching speeds. Sometimes you hallucinate alone in the dark. But it didn't add up. The temperature dropped, my breath fogged the windshield, and my heart seemed to chime with the rhythm of two cars racing nowhere. My mirrors made it worse. They showed not one car, but several. Sometimes two headlights behind me, sometimes none. They drifted and divided as the fog thickened, merging, splitting, playing tricks. I stopped trusting the reflections. When I glanced at my rearview mirror again, my own eyes looked back, a face pressed too near the glass, pale and patient. When I blinked, it was gone, replaced by just the pale blue car in the mist. The trip odometer hit 71. The highway itself curves at that marker, looping toward the city's lights. But I wasn't sure what city I was heading for. I felt a kind of panic begin, a rootless, drifting sensation, like when you misremember your own birthday or lose your keys and realize what you're missing isn't just an object. It's a fundamental part of who you are. That's when the other car drifted into my lane. Not suddenly, not dangerously, just inching closer, as if the space between us was meant to dissolve. Lights washed across my dashboard. My car, my skin, felt diffused, stretched thin like fog. The boundary between me and them was breaking down, like the road was folding both of us into one. I tried to slow. I tried to speed up, anything to reestablish distance, but my feet and hands didn't respond. My body was here, but I was drifting, losing the shape I'd occupied for years. The radio turned on by itself, crackling static, and then a voice broke through, my own, but younger, maybe from years ago, listing memories I hadn't thought about in ages. Favorite toy, childhood friend, favorite song, all the things that anchor us and make us who we are. The words ran together, distorting, merging with someone else's, not quite matching my recollection. I realized the other car was not beside me anymore. It was inside me. Not physically, spiritually, mentally, whatever word you want for a crossing that's more than just swapping lanes. My hands felt unfamiliar. Same scars, but a different way of gripping the wheel. My reflection in the side window was warping, the features blending with a shadow, my expression changing before I felt the emotion. I was becoming, in some small way, someone else. Someone just like me, but not me at all. The streetlights flickered and the world bent. I looked over and for the first time saw a passenger. In my own seat beside me, wearing my jacket, looking out the window, humming a tune I recognized as one I hum when stressed. But this passenger did not acknowledge me. Their face glowed just a bit too pale. When they shifted in their seat, I saw details that didn't fit. A scar on the chin that I don't have. Nails clipped smooth when mine are always ragged. Their eyes flickered back. Not a look, more a takeover. I drove by instinct then, barely registering the highway signs, the landmarks I'd known for years that suddenly looked subtly different. Older or newer or robbed of the associations that once made them familiar. A wrong tree here, a stoplight the wrong color there. My hands gripped the wheel but felt numb. The tattoos on my left knuckles shimmering, shifting shapes in the peripheral vision. Each glance in the mirrors brought a new variation of my own face. Slower, older, younger, stranger. Even the voice on the radio looping back, now talking about memories I know I never had, cities I'd never seen, people I never met, things that almost sounded close, but not quite. As I neared my neighborhood, the houses blurred. I pulled into my driveway, or so I thought. The home looked familiar, but not right. The fence was on the wrong side, the mailbox dull orange instead of rusty red. As I killed the engine, I realized my keys didn't match the ignition. They barely fit, like they belonged to a different car entirely. The passenger beside me turned to look directly at me for the first time. Their lips moved. "You made it," they said in my own voice, but rough, distorted. Almost home. I tried to speak, but there was only silence. Whatever words I meant swallowed up by fog. We walked into what should have been my house. The door unlocked with my key, but the scent in the hallway was wrong. The arrangement of the furniture off by inches, photographs in the hall showing faces I almost recognized, but didn't. My reflection in the hallway mirror split across the glass, one side belonging to me, one side to the passenger. We stood together. Both faces looked at me, then blotted together, merging into a shape I didn't know. I haven't driven Highway 26 since. I check the mirrors obsessively now, catch glimpses of myself in places I shouldn't exist. Sometimes I hear my own voice calling from another room, or see my own jacket hanging where I didn't leave it. The passenger comes and goes. Sometimes they're in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up and feel their presence beside me. People ask why I never take the straight way home anymore. I just shrug and say traffic. But the truth is simpler. The fog makes roads softer. Sometimes reality merges, and you end up riding shotgun in your own life, uncertain who's actually behind the wheel. You know how some sounds don't just travel through the air, they travel straight down your spine. That's what CB Channel 19 feels like to me now. Every time I hear that static, any radio, any background hiss in a store, even a fan that catches the air just right, it takes me straight back to that first night I heard a trucker die in real time on Santiam Pass. And then heard him again the next night. And the next. And the next. Same voice, same mile marker, same snowstorm that ended almost 30 years ago. I run a little CB relay set up from my place out near Sweet Home, Oregon. Nothing official, nothing fancy, just a dedicated antenna, a decent receiver, and too much time on my hands during graveyard hours. I started doing it after a near miss on Highway 20 years back. Listening in became a habit. You'd be surprised how many people still rely on CB up in the mountains when cell service drops out and the weather turns. I keep the scanner on low while I'm puttering around the house, and if anyone calls out something that sounds like real trouble, I call it in. That's how this started. Me half listening, thinking I'd maybe help someone change a tire with my voice and a phone call. It was just after 12:30 a.m. when I heard him. Channel 19. The static fell away like someone parted a curtain, and his voice came through so clear I instinctively looked around, like he was in the room with me. Out of breath, tight with pain, but trying to sound professional. Breaker 19, Breaker 19. This is northbound rig on 20. I'm at mile 87, I think. Santiam Pass. I've rolled it. Cab's pinned. I need someone to copy. I went cold all at once. I knew that stretch. I knew how fast ice could form there when the fog settled into the trees and the temperature dropped just a little too far. I grabbed my notepad the way I always do, wrote down the time, 12:32 a.m. "Copy that, northbound on 20, I said into my mic. "This is a home receiver near Sweet Home. Repeat your situation. I'll call it in." There was a harsh crackle, and then a rattling sound that I realized was glass and metal still settling. He sucked in a breath. I lost it. Black ice. I was coming down off Tombstone in the fog. Didn't see it till... He cut off with a grunt, like someone had dropped a cinder block on his chest. "Trailer jackknifed. Cab sideways. I'm pinned against the door. Can't feel my legs. Think my load went over the side." My hands were already moving. Phone in one, pen in the other, writing down every word. "Highway 20, mile 87, Santiam Pass, jackknifed rig, possible rollover, driver pinned." I could picture the exact place he meant. One of those deceptive curves where the forest feels larger than it should be, leaning in on both sides, like it wants the road back. "Stay with me," I told him. "I'm calling state police now. You just keep talking so I know you're still with us." The dispatcher picked up on the second ring. I rattled off the details automatically, giving my location, his words, his mile marker. They took it seriously immediately. No hesitation, no skepticism. Just that clipped, efficient tone that means they're already hitting buttons and relaying coordinates. "We're dispatching OSP and a rescue unit out of Sisters," the dispatcher told me. "Stay on with the driver if you can, but do not attempt to make contact physically. Let the professionals handle it." I promised I would. Went back to the mic. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Help is on the way. I called you in. Can you tell me your company? Any hazmat on that load?" He gave me the company name, the route. Loading out of Bend, logs headed west. No hazmat, just timber. His breathing kept hitching, shallow and wet. There was something about the way it sounded that dug into me. I've heard hurt people on the radio before, but this had a depth to it. Like I was hearing the air move in a space far bigger than just a cab. "You still there?" he asked. The fear under his voice slipped a little closer to the surface. Don't go quiet on me, all right? It's so damn dark out here." "I'm here," I said. "Tell me what you see out the windshield." There was a long pause where all I could hear was static and that labored breath. Then, nothing. Fog's all the way to the glass, like the lights are shining into milk. No stars, no trees, just white. I can't even see the road. Are you sure I'm still on it?" "You're on it," I lied. "You're on it and people are headed your way. Can you reach your hazard lights?" A rough scraping sound, a hiss of pain. "Think they came on when I rolled. Can't turn my head to check. Something's digging into my back. His voice cracked, dropped to a whisper. "I keep hearing trucks, but none of them are stopping. I hear 'em go by, feel the rumble, but I can't see their lights." "Why can't I see?" The radio squealed, then flooded with static. My heart slammed. "You're still there," I said sharply. "I hear you. Keep talking." He came back like he'd never left. "Hurts," he said. "Feels heavy cold." Then he added, almost conversationally, "I think I know this place." That stopped me. "You drive it a lot?" Yeah, sure. 100 times at least. But I mean, I know it. Like I've been right here before. This exact spot. There's a scar on the guardrail outside my window." A ragged laugh. "I noticed it coming up earlier tonight, you know. Thought, wonder what poor bastard did that. Joke's on me, huh?" I froze with the pen halfway to the paper. Because I knew that scar. I'd seen it myself more than once. a long, bright grind mark, half painted over, where a rig had kissed steel at some point in the late 90s. It was one of those things you stop noticing after enough years until someone says it out loud and pulls it back into focus. I don't know how long we talked after that. Time went funny. I remember asking him where he was from, if he had anyone to call. He told me about a sister in Yakima, a dog waiting at home, a favorite diner in Sisters, where they still remembered his order. Little pieces of a life scattered between grunts of pain and the distant, muffled roar of occasional traffic. The dispatcher cut in twice to ask if I still had him on the line. I said yes both times. The last update I got was that troopers were minutes out. "Do you hear any sirens?" I asked him. "No," he said. "Just trucks that don't exist." "What do you mean?" "I hear 'em." His voice sharpened, panic edging every word. "I hear them come around the bend, engines under load, brakes whistling. I feel 'em shake the rig. But I don't see a damn light. Not one. It's like they're driving through me, like I'm not really here." The hair on my arms lifted. For a second, I was certain I wasn't just hearing him. I was there with him, trapped in that mangled cab with fog pressed to the glass, like a living thing. I could almost feel a cold draft against my own back. "Listen," I said quietly. "I'm staying with you. Right up until a trooper's voice cuts in and I hear him talk to you. Then you can yell at me for my terrible bedside manner, all right?" He gave this broken little snort that might have been a laugh if there'd been more air behind it. "Deal." The line crackled again, and underneath the noise, I heard something else. Fainter, distorted. At first, I thought it was an echo. Then I realized it was his voice, repeating something he'd said minutes earlier, same words, same cadence. "Lost it. Black ice. Coming down off Tombstone in the fog." It looped, overlapped with what he was saying now. Two versions of him layered, like time had slipped and recorded itself wrong. I didn't tell him I heard it. I just gripped the mic harder and watched the clock on the wall crawl forward. At 12:54 a.m., the radio went silent, mid-sentence. "Copy? You still with me?" I said. "Come on, don't do that now. Talk to me." Nothing. Just hiss. I waited for the state police to break in with some variation of, "We have him. He's out. We're en route." That's the payoff you cling to when you're just a voice in a warm room listening to strangers freeze and bleed in the dark. Eventually, the dispatcher came back. Not on CB, but on my phone. "Units reached mile 87, she said, voice careful. "They're clearing the scene now." "Is he conscious?" I asked. There was a pause. Papers rustling. Someone speaking in the background. "Sir," she said slowly, "there's no new accident at that location. They found the site of an old crash. Rollover, log truck, cab down the embankment. It happened in February 1997. Driver didn't survive. There's no vehicle there now." I told her that was impossible. Read his words back to her from my notes. Same mile marker, same curve, same load. I could hear the chill land in her silence, even through the phone. She said she'd check the historical reports. I didn't wait. I started searching myself as soon as we hung up. She called me back an hour later. The dates matched. The company matched. Even the time of night lined up. Around 12:30 a.m., Santiam Pass. Black ice and fog. Fatal. I didn't sleep the next day. I sat at the radio. Midnight came and went. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that this was grief, shock, whatever word you want for the mind trying to explain a tear in the pattern. And then, at 12:32 a.m. on the dot, Channel 19 snapped into sudden Crystal clarity. Breaker 19, Breaker 19. This is northbound rig on 20. I'm at mile 87, I think. Santiam Pass. I've rolled it. Same voice, same words. Same hitch of breath on rolled. I stared at the mic. I didn't answer. Couldn't. I just listened as he lived those minutes again, line for line, word for word, with tiny, horrible differences. An extra groan here, a different curse there. At 12:54, the line cut out. I checked my clock. Same time. It's been months now. Some nights he doesn't come. Some nights he does. Always that same window. Always the same stretch of Highway 20. I've tried everything, answering him, staying silent, talking over him, praying into the mic like an idiot. It doesn't matter. The loop runs. Sometimes, if I keep my own voice low enough, I can hear something underneath his words. A second layer, another version of him, farther away, begging someone to answer who never does. You want to know the worst part? A week ago, I started hearing a third voice under the first two. Mine. Faint, delayed, saying exactly what I'd said that first night. Telling him help was coming, asking what he saw out the windshield, promising I wouldn't leave him alone. So here's what I'm telling you, since you're here with me now, listening. If you're ever on Highway 20 near Santiam Pass around 12:30 in the morning, and your radio picks up a trucker calling for help at mile 87, answer if you want. Or don't. Call it in if you can. It won't change what already happened in 1997. It won't pull him out of that cab. But understand this. Not every distress call is in real time. Some of them are echoes. Some of them are grooves cut so deep into a place that the moment never stops replaying. And if you listen long enough, if you let that moment hook into you the way I did, sooner or later, your voice becomes part of the recording too. You ever show up to a crash scene and realize you're not the first one there? Not because another crew beat you, but because the road itself remembers what happened and refuses to let it go. That's what it was like the first time I worked the guardrail on that stretch of Highway 101 between Cannon Beach and Arch Cape. I thought I was responding to one accident. Turns out I was stepping into all of them at once. I've been an EMT along the Oregon coast long enough to know the bad spots by heart. There's one curve just past a turnout. Cliff on one side, ocean chewing at the rock below. Guardrail bowed and re-straightened more times than anyone can count. Every local responder knows it. We joke darkly about the frequent flyer guardrail. You see it in the fog and your stomach tightens before dispatch even calls. That night, the call came in at 2:11 a.m. Single vehicle, possible rollover. Unknown number of occupants. Heavy fog. I already knew where they meant before they finished the mile marker. The fog was the thick, coastal kind that doesn't drift. It hangs. It eats sound. It swallowed our sirens as we wound down 101, leaving just a faint, tinny wail inside the cab. My partner drove. I watched the right shoulder, scanning for skid marks, broken posts, any sign of movement in the curtain of gray. The GPS flickered between good reception and nothing. The radio crackled with half-words from dispatch. It felt like driving into a closed room with the door swinging shut behind us. Then the world turned blue and red, our lights reflecting off fog and metal. The guardrail was right where I knew it would be. So was the car. A late model SUV, nose crumpled against the rail, rear still in the lane, hazard lights blinking like a panicked heartbeat. No other units yet, no bystanders. Just us, the wreck, and the ocean pounding somewhere below the cliff where we couldn't see it. I hopped out, boots hitting damp asphalt, my breath immediately visible in the cold. It was quiet. Too quiet for a crash that recent. No horn blaring, no engine roaring, no one screaming. Just our siren fading as my partner cut it, and the soft tick of cooling metal. "Hello?" I called as I approached the driver's side. "EMS, can you hear me?" The driver's door opened before I got there. That stopped me for a half second. Not because doors don't open, but because of how it opened. Smoothly, calmly, like someone casually stepping out after parking at a grocery store. A person emerged, followed by another from the passenger side, then a smaller figure from the back. 3 of them, standing upright. No blood visible, no staggering, no glass stuck in hair or clothes. Just 3 people on the shoulder of Highway 101 at 2:15 in the morning, looking at me with the kind of expression you see in waiting rooms. Patient, resigned, almost bored. "You folks okay?" I said, switching gears from trauma triage to assessment. "Anyone hurt? Neck pain? Head impact?" "We're fine," the one closest to me said. The voice was level. Too level. "We're not going." I frowned. "Not going where?" They glanced back at the guardrail, then out into the fog where the cliff dropped away. "Away," they said. "It's not time yet. We have to stay until the rest get here." Now, you hear strange things on scenes. Shock does weird things to the brain. People talk nonsense, repeat themselves, latch onto single words. I chalked it up to that, at first. I switched on my flashlight, sweeping it over each of them in turn, pupils equal and reactive. No obvious injuries. Clothes damp from the fog but not soaked. No one shivering, even though I felt the cold straight through my jacket. "Let's at least get you checked in the rig," I said, defaulting to procedure. "We'll take a look, warm you up, make sure." "We're not leaving the guardrail," the second one said. They sounded exactly the same as the first. Not just similar voice, identical cadence, identical flat certainty. "We're waiting." "For who?" I asked, irritation starting to edge into the unease. "Look, I understand you're shaken up, but this is a dangerous spot. If another car comes around that bend—" "They already have," the smallest one said. "A lot of them. They just haven't all hit yet." Something moved in the fog beyond them. A shape, low and twisted. My beam followed the motion, cutting across the guardrail, and my chest went tight. The metal was wrong. Guardrails along that stretch get dented, scraped, bent. Maintenance crews hammer them back into shape. You get used to the scars. But this one had too many. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw at least 6 distinct bends within a span of maybe 20 feet. Some old and rusted, others shiny, one still weeping a thin line of fresh orange where paint had been scraped away. It looked like someone had taken snapshots of different accidents and layered them on top of each other. New bolts next to corroded ones. Freshly replaced posts wedged between weather-beaten, splintered wood. I took a step closer, and the fog shifted, drawing back like a curtain. That's the only way I can describe it. One moment I could see only the SUV and the rail. The next, I saw more vehicles. A compact car nose down against the same section of rail, its rear end lifted. A pickup, sideways, its front wheels hanging over the edge. An old station wagon I knew damn well wasn't road legal anymore, its windshield a spiderweb of cracks. They were overlapping, transparent, like reflections in misaligned mirrors. Some were faded, almost ghostly. Others nearly solid, all of them touching the same scarred metal. I blinked hard. The scene snapped back to just the SUV. Just one wreck, just one set of hazards flashing. The three figures hadn't moved. They hadn't even turned to look at the other vehicles I thought I'd seen. My partner came up beside me, gear bag in hand, cursing under his breath at the visibility. "Any injuries?" he asked. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know. Physically, they looked fine. Mentally, I wasn't sure there was a box for whatever this was. "We're waiting," the three of them said together. Same tone, same pitch. Perfectly synchronized, like a choir that had practiced the line for years. My partner shot me a look. The kind that says, "Are you hearing this too?" I nodded, almost imperceptibly. We went into our practiced routine anyway. Vitals, questions, gentle reassurance. They allowed us to check their pulses, their breathing, their pupils. Everything read as normal. Skin cool, but not cold. Heart rate steady. They answered every medical question with calm precision. No head trauma, no lost consciousness, no pain. But every time we suggested moving them, into the rig, away from the rail, even just a few steps back, they refused. Politely, firmly, in unison. "We're waiting for the rest. We're not leaving them again." "Again?" I asked. They turned their faces toward the water, where we couldn't see anything but fog and distant white noise. "We left last time," one of them said. And the other two's lips moved with the same words a fraction of a second behind. They went over without us. Took years to find our way back. We're not making that mistake again. Headlights rounded the bend up the road. My partner waved traffic down, directing it around the wreck. The new drivers slowed, rubbernecked like they always do, and kept moving. I watched the beams sweep across the rail. For a brief second, in that wash of light, the other cars were back, the compact, the pickup, the wagon, layered over the SUV like a stack of old transparencies. In each, I saw shapes sitting in the driver's seats. Passengers, kids, old folks, faces half turned like they were listening for something. Our radios crackled. Dispatch updating us, no other injuries reported, tow on the way, law enforcement en route. I keyed my mic, started to reply, and stopped. Under the dispatcher's voice, there was another sound, a faint chorus. Dozens of voices all talking at once, overlapping in a sibilant hiss. None of the words were clear, but the intent was. Waiting. We're still waiting. I stepped right up to the rail then, close enough to touch it. The metal hummed under my palm, vibrating with the residual energy of every impact it had ever absorbed. For a moment, I felt dizzy. Images hit me like headlights. A car from the 70s slamming sideways, people screaming, a minivan spinning in slow motion, glass exploding outward, a motorcycle skidding, sparks showering off the rail. Over and over, different decades, different clothes, same spot. Same sickening crunch, same instant where a normal night drive became a permanent story embedded in steel. "Back up," one of the three said sharply. It was the first time any of them had shown anything like emotion. "You don't want to stand there when they come." "When who comes?" I asked, but I already knew. "The ones who still have to hit," they answered. "All the ones who haven't gotten here yet." I did step back then. Not because I believed them, not exactly. But because every instinct I had was suddenly screaming that the rail was not a thing. It was a place, a boundary with a waiting room built into it. And these three standing in front of me weren't confused survivors in shock. They were people who'd been claimed and somehow sent back, or who never really left. Law enforcement arrived. The scene filled up the way they always do: flashing lights, reflective vests, clipboards, tape. By the time the trooper in charge asked us about the patients, the three had gone quiet. They answered questions, let themselves be guided to the back of the rig for signatures, refused transport with that eerie, polite certainty. "We have to stay near," they said. "They're not all here yet." We cleared the scene eventually. We had to. Protocol doesn't have a section for patients are waiting for temporal spillover victims. But as we pulled away, I glanced out the back window of the ambulance. The towing crew was hooking up the SUV. The guardrail loomed behind it, battered and bright in the work lights. And lined up along it, spaced every few feet, were silhouettes. Not just three. Dozens. Faint, thin as breath on glass, some barely there at all. All standing, all facing the road, watching the curve, waiting. I blinked, and they were gone. Just fog. Just steel. Just another bad spot on Highway 101. I still run calls out there. It's my job. I still stand by that guardrail sometimes while we work. Feel the vibration under my boots when a semi roars by in the fog. And every now and then, when the air gets very still and my breath seems too loud, I hear a chorus of voices just under the wind and the surf. Not screaming, not begging, just waiting to be joined. Fog doesn't just sit on the road up in the gorge. It clings. It listens. Sometimes it gathers in the places nobody looks up at. The cliffs, the moss, the abandoned pullouts. And does something with the things we leave behind. You're probably thinking of trash, old tires, beer cans. I used to think that too. But I'm a photographer. I was the one pointing a lens at it when I realized the fog on Highway 30 wasn't just drifting. It was being collected. I'd been working on this personal project for a while. Bones of the Old Highway, I called it. Early mornings on the historic Columbia River Highway, shooting long exposures of the fog, the old stone walls, the places people pass without seeing. I like that in-between time when the world is half asleep and light hasn't decided what color it wants to be yet. You know the stretch near Crown Point. Vista House looming over the river like something out of another century? That's where this started. It was just before 7 a.m., late fall, the kind of cold that bites through your gloves in 5 minutes. The gorge was filled with fog, thick as milk, but not uniform. It moved in bands. I remember thinking that was odd. Layers instead of a solid blanket. I pulled into this little gravel turnout I'd used a dozen times before. It's nothing special. Just a curve with a low wall and enough space to get your car mostly out of the lane. But that morning, there were already vehicles there. 3 trucks. No logos, old shapes. Boxy, like they hadn't rolled off a line since the 70s. Their hazard lights weren't on, but each one had these tall, skinny poles mounted in the beds, tips lost in the fog overhead. I almost just backed out and left. I hate getting in the way of road crews, but curiosity kept me. No cones, no road work ahead signs, no reflective vests moving around. Just those trucks and a hum I felt more in my teeth than in my ears. I killed my engine, stepped out, and instantly felt watched. Not from the road, from the trees, from the stone. The fog by the river had that bluish, early morning tint. But here on the turnout, it had a yellow cast, like it was catching a kind of light I couldn't see. There were 4 figures by the wall. At first, I thought they were workers. Dark coveralls, caps pulled low. But they weren't doing anything I recognized as work. Each one held a glass cylinder, as long as my arm, capped at both ends with dull metal. The glass didn't reflect right. It sort of swallowed the light instead. They were scooping fog. I watched one step slowly along the wall, holding the cylinder out in front of them. The fog around it swirled down and into the glass, like it was being sucked through an invisible funnel. The rest of the air stayed still, just a neat column of mist spiraling into that tube. When it was full, the worker capped it, gave it a little shake, and the fog inside settled. Denser, darker somehow, like storm clouds trapped in a jar. They carried it back to one of the trucks and slotted it into a rack already holding half a dozen more. I remember thinking, sleep deprivation, you're hallucinating. I actually rubbed my eyes like a cliché. But when I looked again, they were still at it. The others were moving in a line, combing the pullout in slow, deliberate sweeps. They never spoke. Not to each other, not into radios, not to me. Just that quiet shuffling motion and the faint clink of glass on metal when they racked another cylinder full of fog. Reflex took over. I lifted my camera. Old habits. I didn't even think about whether I should. I framed the scene, focused on one of the workers in profile, fog curling around their boots, and fired off a burst. I heard the shudder. I felt the vibration. But through the viewfinder, the frame was empty. The wall, the turnout, the trees, no trucks, no workers, just fog evenly spread. I lowered the camera. Trucks, workers, poles stabbing the sky, jars in their hands. Raised the camera again, empty. You know that moment when your brain hits a wall it can't climb and just slides down it? That's what it felt like. My heart rate kicked up, breath going shallow. Part of me wanted to call out, "Hey!" The rest of me wanted to get back in my car and pretend I'd never stopped. I compromised by taking one step backward. That was when one of them turned and looked directly at me. From a distance, their faces passed as normal. Up close, close enough that my brain decided to throw details into the too much drawer. They were off. Imagine a face copied from memory by someone who's only seen people from the corner of their eye. The proportions were just wrong. Eyes a little too wide apart, nose a little too low, mouth too straight. Not uncanny in that Hollywood monster way. Uncanny in the, this could be a real person you'd forget 5 seconds after they walked away, way. Their eyes locked onto my camera first, then my face. It took my mind a second to realize what was wrong with their gaze. There was no startle. No annoyance at being photographed. Just a calm assessment, like I was another section of air to measure and harvest. Their lips moved. I didn't hear a sound with my ears, but my brain heard over the low hum of whatever was powering those poles. You're early. It wasn't words, not really. More like the meaning slid into my thoughts, already translated. I almost dropped the camera. I managed to say, "Road crew out early, huh?" Just to prove to myself I still knew how to make sound. They didn't answer. They glanced at the nearest pole instead. It extended another foot on its own, telescoping up into fog I still couldn't see the top of. Through the haze, I saw shapes hanging off those poles. Not equipment, not lights. Bottles. Hundreds of them. Long glass cylinders like the ones in their arms, suspended at different heights. Each with its own shade trapped inside. Some nearly clear, some almost black. I took another involuntary step back. Gravel crunched under my boot. The sound seemed to startle the fog more than them. It rippled, almost flinched. And in that ripple, I saw something that made my throat go dry. Faces. Not clear, not with features I could name, but impressions, indents, like someone had pressed hundreds of profiles into damp plaster and pulled them away. They were all oriented toward the trucks, toward the jars. The worker who'd noticed me took a few steps closer, not threatening, just purposeful. I raised my camera again like it was a shield. Through the viewfinder, empty turnout. No one between me and the stone wall. Lower the camera, the worker was 5 feet away, glass cylinder cradled in their arms, like a child. "You can't be here," they said, lips barely moving. This time, I heard sound, but it was wrong. Play a recording on a machine that's running at the wrong speed. That's what it reminded me of. The consonants dragged, the vowels clipped. This section's scheduled. Scheduled for what? I asked. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. They tipped the cylinder toward me just enough that I could see what was inside. It wasn't just fog. The mist in there clung to the glass in slow, reaching motions, like it wanted out. Like it recognized the shape of a human being on the other side and remembered being one. As I watched, it formed a handprint that matched my own too closely for comfort, then smeared away again. "You drive through it," they said. "You breathe it. You leave things in it you don't want anymore. We take what's left." Every hair on my arm stood up. "What do you mean, things?" Their head tilted like a crow examining something shiny. Behind them, another truck's bed slammed as someone finished loading. I realized backup had arrived without sound. More trucks, more poles, more bottles filling with the morning's harvest. "Time," they said simply. "Fear, scraps, the pieces you shed when you think no one's watching. You've left enough on this road to fill a shelf." I took that as a bad sign. "Is that a problem?" "For the road? No." They glanced past me toward the highway. A single car ghosted past, headlights cutting through the fog, its occupants blissfully unaware that anything existed beyond their radio and lane. "It lightens the load. For us? No. It's work." Their gaze snapped back to me. "For you, it depends. You're seeing this before we're done with your section." I felt it then. A coldness, not on my skin, but behind my ribs, like air moving through a space that hadn't been there seconds before. Memory, slippery and partial, spilled through me. All the times I'd come up here to clear my head, to walk the overlooks and let the fog take it. Every ugly thought I dumped into that gray nothing. Every quiet breakdown in the driver's seat before I pulled myself together and went home like nothing was wrong. "What happens if I stay?" I asked. They stepped close enough that I could see the fog inside the cylinder reacting to my breath, to my heartbeat. "You'd match. Easier that way. No waste." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back in the car, to peel out, to never stop on an empty turnout in the gorge at dawn again. But my legs weren't moving. My fingers ached around the camera grip, numb and distant. They raised their free hand and, for the first time, actually touched me. Just 2 fingers, light against my sternum, exactly where that cold emptiness had bloomed. It was like being grounded by static, except instead of discharging energy, they seemed to be taking inventory. For a heartbeat, we were both very still. Then they frowned, barely a twitch of the eyebrows, and withdrew their hand. "Not ready," they said. "You're still using most of it." "Most of what?" "Yourself." They turned away, as if that settled it, and went back to their methodical harvesting. I don't remember walking back to my car. I remember the slam of the door, the rasp of my own panicked breathing, the way my hands shook on the ignition. In the rearview mirror, the turnout was a smear of gray. No trucks, no poles, no workers. Just the stone wall and the usual fog. Perfectly innocent. I drove home on autopilot. I didn't look at the river or the cliffs, or the way the mist seemed to cling to my mirrors a little longer than it should have. Later, when I finally worked up the courage to check my camera, every frame from that turnout was the same. An empty pullout, a stone wall, trees fading into fog. Except in the very last shot. In that one, way up at the top of the frame, where the sky should have been, there was a line of dark shapes hanging down, just barely visible. Cylinders, hundreds of them, each one with a different shade trapped inside. And in the bright rectangle of my car window, I could see my own reflection. Or something that looked like me, just a little thinner, eyes just a little more hollow. I still go out with my camera. It's what I do. But I don't shoot fog on Highway 30 at dawn anymore. And if you ever stop at one of those forgotten pullouts in the gorge and see unmarked trucks with old equipment and people who don't cast right in your peripheral vision, do yourself a favor. Don't look too long. Don't breathe too deep. Don't leave anything in the fog you're not willing to lose. Because someone might be there to collect it. And the next time they see you, they might decide you're finally ready. You ever have a moment where you're absolutely sure you died? But then you blink and you're back a few seconds earlier, still alive, still driving, with your heart pounding like it's trying to knock out of your chest? Most people laugh that off as adrenaline. I don't anymore. Not after what happened to me on I-90 near Snoqualmie Pass, on a moonless night when the fog froze on the asphalt and time started looping around a single patch of black ice. I want you to picture being in the driver's seat with me, because that's the only way this makes any sense. It was just after 11:40 p.m., eastbound on I-90, coming down near mile marker 47. The kind of cold that makes the air feel thin, 31 degrees and dropping. The snowbanks pushed off to the shoulder like dirty walls. Fog hugged the road in low strips, not the tall, towering stuff, just ground-hugging mist that your headlights skim across. The kind you tell yourself isn't a big deal. I'd been driving for hours, music low, heater clicking, that quiet highway trance setting in. The digital clock on the dash clicked over to 11:43 p.m. at the exact second my tires hit the black ice. I didn't see it. Of course I didn't. That's the whole point of black ice. One moment I had control, hands light on the wheel, cruise set a little under the limit because of the fog. The next moment, the steering went weightless. The car drifted half a lane to the right, like someone had nudged it with an invisible shoulder. My stomach dropped. Instinct kicked in. Foot off the gas, don't slam the brakes, steer into the skid. You know all the rules, but your body still tenses like you're about to hit something. The back end started to swing. The guardrail on the right lurched closer in a smear of metal and fog. For a heartbeat, the whole car felt like it was floating sideways. I remember a sound. Tires squealing, sure. But under that, a low screech like metal being slowly torn. I had a flash of absolute clarity. This is it. This is the moment. I'm going to flip. I'm going over. And then, I was 3 seconds earlier. There's no other way to describe it. No cut to black, no tunnel, no replay. Just this jarring, stomach-wrenching jump where my body remembered spinning. But my eyes were suddenly looking at straight road again. Hands on the wheel, music still playing, same stretch of I-90 under my headlights, same fog, and the clock on the dash said 11:43 again. I almost drove off right then. My brain had to skid to catch up. The physical shock of the near crash clung to me. Heart hammering, palms sweaty, muscles buzzing with adrenaline. But I wasn't in the ditch. I wasn't spinning. I was fine. Rolling along at 58 meps like nothing had happened. I told myself it was one of those adrenaline time distortions. You know when a close call feels like it took forever, but it's only a second? That had to be. I took a breath, flexed my fingers on the wheel, forced a shaky laugh, and told myself to calm down. Then I hit the black ice again. Same invisible slip, same sideways drift, same instant of knowing I was no longer in control. My stomach bottomed out in a déjà vu so strong it almost made me gag. This time I reacted faster because I remembered it, even though it hadn't happened yet. I eased off the gas more smoothly, tried to keep the wheel steady. It didn't matter. The back end went out again, a little harder, and the world tilted. I saw the reflective posts lining the shoulders start to spin, smears of white, and I could feel gravity twisting sideways as the right side of the car dipped. I had time for one thought, sharp and clear. I just died a second time. Then I was back. 3 seconds earlier, straight road, hands on the wheel, music, 11:43 p.m. glowing on the dash like it had never changed. The third time, I didn't breathe at all. I knew exactly where it would happen, down to the faint, darker sheen on the road that my headlights couldn't quite define. Everything in me wanted to brake hard, pull over, do anything but keep rolling toward that spot. But I couldn't. It was like my arms and legs were being piloted by habit, not fear. My foot eased off the gas just like it had the first time. I steered like I always do through that curve. I watched the clock tick its way toward 11:43 like it was counting down to an execution. I tried to change lanes. Nothing happened. The wheel turned, but the car didn't drift left. It stayed locked in its tire tracks, invisible rails guiding it straight toward that patch of road. The air felt thick, like I was moving underwater. My hands tingled. My tongue felt too big in my mouth. The world narrowed to the faint line where dry asphalt ended and black ice began. When the tires hit this time, there was no gentle slip, no illusion of control. The car snapped sideways like someone had yanked the rear with a chain. I felt the left wheels lift, saw sky where the road had been, heard metal scream as the undercarriage scraped something. The guardrail rushed up. Glass burst somewhere. There was pain in my left side, white hot and sudden, and the taste of blood filled my mouth. Then, straight road, music, fog. 11:43 p.m. I started screaming, not words, just raw sound. It didn't change anything. The loop didn't care how I felt about it. I drove. I hit the ice. I lost control. The impact changed a little each time, harder or softer, flipping this way or that. But it always ended the same. That lurching spin, the snap of bone or the crack of glass, and then a rewind back to those 3 seconds before the ice. What made it worse, what truly broke me, was the memory. I didn't forget the failed runs. I remembered all of them. Each time I reset, my body added another layer of bruises that hadn't happened yet, another echo of pain that hadn't reached my nerves this time around. After 5, 10, 20 loops, my brain was a shredded film strip full of crashes, each one ending at a different angle, each one with a slightly different flavor of terror. I tried everything. Braking early, taking my foot off the gas a quarter mile back, turning off the engine and coasting, yanking the wheel hard and trying to put the car into the median before the ice. I even tried stopping completely on the shoulder, hands clenched white on the wheel, hazard lights blinking like desperate Morse code. None of it mattered. Every time, some invisible narrative snapped back into place and shoved me forward. If I stopped early, the car shuddered and jerked like someone had rear-ended me and pushed me on. If I tried to cut into the median, the road under me warped, lanes shifting until I was back in the right track, pointed straight at that slick, black shine. At some point, loop 15, 20, I stopped fighting and started observing. Maybe that sounds insane, but terror burns out after a while. You hit a threshold where the fear is so constant, it becomes background noise. I started noticing details instead. The exact pattern of frost on the guardrail, the torn green of a highway sign for Asahel Curtis that flashed by just before the bend, the way the fog always seemed a little thicker over the ice, almost like steam rising from invisible water. I noticed something else too. On every loop, there came a moment, right after the car started to spin but before the impact, when the world outside the windshield slowed. Not just in the way fear stretches time, literally slowed. The headlights of a semi in the oncoming lane froze as twin stars in the distance. Fog hung motionless in the beam. Even the song on the radio stuttered and held on a single note, a thin, endless whine. In that held breath instant, I could see another car in the passenger seat reflection. Not mine, not this run, a different version. Sometimes the windshield was already shattered. Sometimes the airbag had deployed. Sometimes there was blood on the inside of the glass, thin sprays like red mist, frozen in place. I could see myself in those other cars, eyes wide or closed or half-lidded, head turned at unnatural angles. A whole row of overlapping me's at different points in the same disaster. That's when it clicked. I wasn't trying to avoid the accident. I was trapped inside it. That patch of black ice wasn't just slick pavement. It was the moment everything ended, stretched out, replayed, layered. I'd already crashed. My body, somewhere back there in the real timeline, was already bleeding out, or whatever comes next. What I was experiencing was the echo. The mind's refusal to accept a hard cutoff, chewing the last 3 seconds to pieces over and over, looking for a version where the story continued. Once I understood that, something shifted. On what I think was the last loop, I didn't touch the wheel, didn't fight the skid, didn't scream. I just watched. I let the car hit the ice, let it slide, let the rear come around, the world tilt, the guardrail rear up like a punching fist. Time tried to slow again, but I didn't grab for it. I didn't try to squeeze more seconds out of the gap. I rode it. The impact came. The sound was huge. There are no good words for it. Metal and bone and glass and road, all having an argument at once. I felt the seatbelt cut into my chest, felt my head hit something hard, felt a cold rush that I think was the window giving way, and the night pouring in. Pain flared, then folded. The last thing I saw, reflected in what was left of the side mirror, was my own face in the passenger seat, only this time, it wasn't some alternate, broken version. It was just me, looking back with this calm, almost pitying expression. Then there was nothing. When I woke up, I wasn't on the highway. I was standing, or something like standing, off to the side of the scene, watching people work around a crumpled mess of metal that might once have been my car. Red and blue lights painted the fog. Figures moved with practiced urgency. Someone draped a sheet over a shape on the pavement. Time had gone back to normal, The loop snapped. This was the run that stuck. I realized in that moment that all those earlier loops hadn't been about escape. They'd been about refusal. Some non-physical part of me slammed replay on the only reel it had, those 3 seconds before the crash, and demanded a different ending. But the road, the ice, the angle, the speed, all of it was fixed. There was only ever going to be one ending. The loop ended the second I stopped fighting, and let that be true. If you're wondering how I can tell you this, sitting here like I'm just recounting a bad trip, I wonder that too. I don't have a good answer. Maybe this is what the mind does in the last instant, spinning full-length stories into the gap between heartbeats. Maybe I'm still in that final loop, and this is just another way of trying to bargain with inevitability by telling it like a campfire tale. All I know is this. If you ever find yourself driving a mountain highway at night and you get that bone-deep certainty that you already died 3 seconds ago, don't assume you're wrong. Don't assume time only moves one way, because it usually does. Sometimes it gets caught. Sometimes it stutters. And sometimes a patch of black ice is more than just frozen water. It's a place where a moment broke so hard it started playing on repeat, dragging you back into itself until you finally accept the version that was always going to happen. Check your clock. If it's 11:43 p.m. for the third time in a row, you might want to ask yourself if you're actually still on the road, or if the road has already let you go. You ever have someone show up when you're stranded that feels so helpful it's unsettling? Not dangerous, not overtly menacing. Too efficient, too prepared, too certain you needed them before you did. That's how it felt when the tow truck rolled up on Highway 101 west of Port Angeles, long before I'd even realized anything was wrong. I never called for help. I never broke down. But somehow, my service order was already logged, time-stamped to a moment 3 hours in the future. The fog off the Strait of Juan de Fuca was particularly thick that afternoon, gray swallowing the pines and pressing the world in tighter with every mile. I was heading for the Lake Crescent area, enjoying the rare solitude when the forest closes around the highway and cell service disappears. My car was humming, heater blasting against the damp chill. The traffic faded into memory behind me, and it was just my headlights carving slices into the mist. I slowed at a bend near Lyre River Road, distracted by the silence and the curl of fog. That's when the yellow lights appeared behind me, flashing clean amber through the wall of white. In my mirrors, the tow truck seemed to float rather than drive, appearing out of nowhere on an empty stretch where no one ever stops unless they must. I switched lanes, let it pass, but it didn't. It trailed me, matched my speed, then pulled up parallel on the shoulder as if waiting for my invitation. I didn't stop at first. Why would I? My dashboard showed nothing wrong, no warning lights, no change in the engine's steady rhythm. Yet the driver nodded, smiled, and gestured for me to roll my window down. His uniform looked old, dark navy with a stitched patch declaring courtesy service. He produced a clipboard with my name on top, my exact car model and color below, and a box for my signature, all before I'd spoken a word. "You must be the driver of the silver sedan," he said. "You're 3 hours late for your drop-off." He spoke in that strange middle ground between gentle and insistent, a tone that expected compliance, not questions. I stammered. "I didn't call for a tow." The driver marked something on the paperwork, nodded, and said my car was scheduled for roadside maintenance. He even described a problem down to the last detail, the engine knock, the battery drain, the sudden loss of power that hadn't happened, at least not yet. That's when my car sputtered. As if his words had flipped a switch, the engine shuddered once, twice, and the lights dimmed. I felt it. That electric dread when machinery, reliable and trusted, turns on you in the loneliest place it can. My heart rate kicked up. I tried to restart, but the dashboard went black, radio fizzing out to static. The tow truck eased forward, stopped again, and the driver stepped out. He was tall, frame cutting a sharp silhouette in the fog. He didn't run, didn't rush. He simply walked to my car and tapped the window, clipboard at his side, uniform crisp as if ironed for an inspection. "Let's get you sorted," he said. His accent was local, but his choice of words just off enough to seem rehearsed. "We have to keep schedule. You don't want to be here after dark." My mind raced for logic. A prank? A mistake? But the paperwork had my signature, scrawled and looping, exactly as I sign in a hurry. The time on the form was 3 hours later than now, and the location was pinpointed to this exact patch of highway. It felt like a script written around me before I arrived. I tried my phone. No bars, no emergency calls. I looked up again and saw the tow driver disconnecting a cable from his truck's winch, preparing to hook it to my front axle. I got out, meaning to object, to protest this forced rescue, but my body didn't seem to fully cooperate. My limbs buzzed, vision tunneled a little at the edges. The cold wasn't the fog anymore. It was a peculiar, icy draft radiating from the ground beneath my feet. The driver handed me the clipboard with that easy smile. "Just a signature for the record. Makes things smooth for both sides." There was something about how he said "both sides" that chilled me deeper than the wind ever could. He hooked the cable, checked the tension, and guided me with polite efficiency. "It's not so bad once you let the paperwork handle itself," he said. "Time only matters on the schedule, after all." That's when the world tilted. For a blink, I wasn't on the highway, but inside the cab of the truck. The interior was freezing and smellless, seat vinyl pressed stiff to the metal frame. My car, battered and unfamiliar, appeared in the mirror. Looks that changed in quick flashes, sometimes dented, sometimes clean, sometimes with frost spidering across the glass. The driver spoke again, this time not for me, but for someone else, maybe to himself. "Right on schedule, no need for reminders." The fog outside pressed harder against the window, leaving streaks like winding fingers. I heard a low whine, a distant tone like a phone left off the hook, rising and falling in the mist. Reality snapped back. Me standing by the trunk of my car, the tow cable tight, the clipboard still in my hands. I looked down. The paperwork wasn't just for a service call. It listed every trip I'd made along this stretch, times of day, conditions, and a predicted breakdown column that matched with prophetic accuracy. Squinting at the rows, I saw future dates. Scheduled events I'd never lived through, places I'd never planned to stop, reasons I couldn't comprehend. The tow truck driver gestured to the cab. "After you." Something in me broke, all resistance fading under the tidal pull of inevitability. I climbed into the freezing cab. My breath fogged the glass. The tow truck rolled forward, car in tow. As we moved, the driver hummed quietly, tuneless and low. The road seemed to shift, familiar turns becoming sharper, trees pressing closer to the edge. The fog thickened to brick and mortar, and the world outside became shadow on shadow. Sometimes, when the truck passed a certain marker, I'd see new vehicles on the shoulder, drivers standing by as if waiting for their turn at the schedule. We pulled off where the form said we would, 3 hours later, into a lot I'd never seen before. The fog was absolute. The tow driver stepped out, opened my car door, and said, "All done now." There was no bill, no handshake. He handed me my own key, which bore a scuff that wasn't there before, and turned away. The clipboard went into his truck, the paperwork sealed for records. I watched as he drove off, tail lights swallowing into the mist. My car started fine, the dashboard bright and welcoming. But the clock was wrong. 3 hours later than when I broke down. My phone, now alive, blinked with missed messages, all from friends worried about where I'd gone, all time-stamped within the lost hours. I checked my mirrors as I left. In the rear view, the tow truck was briefly visible, waiting at the corner. A figure inside watching, unmoving. The fog didn't let up for 20 miles. Since then, I've seen that truck on 3 separate trips. Never close, never needed. Just waiting for its time to align with my own. And the paperwork in my glove box, the repair records, maps, even a gas receipt from a lot I never stopped at, reminds me the schedule is always running, even if I'm not aware of it. So be careful with roadside help that comes before you need it. Sometimes the tow isn't for your car. It's for the version of you that was expected all along, whether you were ready or not. And when the schedule calls, nothing in your world will keep you off it.